Shooting floppy guys with giant cannons and sucking them with black holes just wasn't cool enough. So I added a massive wrecking ball to my game to satisfy your floppy guy destruction needs. In case you're new here, I'm making a game where you play as a floppy guy racing to the end of the map, and one huge player tries to stop them with a collection of towers and abilities. Wishlist the game on Steam, or Joe will come to your house at night. To add the wrecking ball, I first had to watch a tutorial because I have no idea what to start with. But with the help of Christopher the Wrecking Ball tutorial man, not too long later I had a working chain. Now we just add the ball, and of course spend 10 minutes playing around with it before I realize I'm wasting time. The challenge came from actually making it work as a tower, because it's all fun swinging it around yourself, but making the game actually do it itself consistently without doing this all the time is a different story. No word of a lie, this took me almost 2 hours to do, because not only was it hard to find a swinging pattern that worked, but I'm also absolutely shit at maths, so every time I thought of a way for it to rotate, I had to try 20 different number combinations before it resembled what I wanted it to do.
You actually ever sat at a table and watched 6
floppy guys
with this fucking donkey's dick swinging in front of their face?
We still have to make variations of it for the upgrades. So for one of them, I opted for an easy option of having a huge wrecking ball that has the weight cranked up to over 9,000 and stops anything and everything in its path. And for the second one, I made a pair of balls, which cover more ground than the huge heavy ball, but aren't as strong individually. And of course, my tooltip humor has never been worse. I noticed these will be pretty good against players who upgrade jump height, because they're one of the only towers that can actually affect airborne floppy guys alongside black holes. So currently, it isn't actually possible to play the game properly. The main menu doesn't do anything, and there's no proper game loop. Before a game, players will be spawned into a massive arena, and they have to slap each other, and the last player standing will become the huge guy. Of course, this would take forever if nothing speeds it up. And remember, we're just trying to quickly choose a player, not have a whole game in itself. So instead of having a Fortnite circle, which wouldn't be that original, I opted to split the island into multiple pieces, which was really easy to do in Blender with this extension. Then I just made it randomly fall apart over 20 seconds until only one tiny piece remains and the last player wins, which worked well after I fixed this bug where it would run once every single frame. Nice. Spawning everyone into the next map after this was painful because I'd never had to change level for everyone in a multiplayer match before. The player models had a mind of their own, and for some time wouldn't actually connect to the player that was supposed to be controlling them. That was fun to fix. So apparently there's this thing called friends, and people want to queue for games with them. This sounds simple, doesn't it? But when you think about it, the list of tasks is actually pretty damn long. I started by doing the only thing I knew how to do, which is copying and pasting the platform for more players to stand on. Then I spent literally an entire day creating UI in Photoshop, getting the friends list from Steam, filtering it, finding out how to send an invite, only to find out Steam could have done all of this for me with a single line of code. Another funny thing I noticed is the longer the main menu runs, the weirder the character becomes. I'm tempted not to fix this because it's actually quite funny. It's at this point I've begun realizing why there isn't a single tutorial on how to do matchmaking with friends, or for that matter, any good resources on how to make this work. Thankfully, the Steam documentation is very nicely laid out. I don't know what this means. This, coupled with the fact that other gaming YouTubers just opt for lobby browsers, made me realize, wait, if I do this, I'm better than Dani at make game. Holy shit. I added a cool kick button to kick people in your party, which decided to be affected by gravity when I first made it. Of course, when I stopped that from happening, I found out the button didn't work, and instead of deleting everyone's character, it just spawned a new one over and over and over and over. I managed to fix it to the point where it only spawned one additional player, and this looked extremely sus. After the party and main menu BS was done, it was actually time to press find match and queue with your friends. I'm not gonna bore you with that, but that was a whole ordeal in itself. Oh, and you're also not gonna be able to cancel finding a match, because even though the code I wrote made perfect sense, it didn't work, and if I look at this again, I think I'm gonna delete the whole game, so let's move on. Thank God I had a holiday literally right after I finished this bit, because I needed it badly. So now that my legs are nice and tanned, I realized that the start and end of the game are kind of anticlimactic. For the ending, I decided to make a massive version of the mini player explosion and have the big guy shatter into a million pieces all over the map, which worked well, especially with this screen shake I added. The start of the game was going to be a bit harder, because I'd love him to have some sort of grand entrance. I've had a lot of trouble animating him in the past because his limbs are controlled by rigs, which are almost like little puppet strings telling him where to point his arms and body. But then I had a genius idea. What if I just disable them? Remember last time I clicked the animate button, he did this. Now with the rigs disabled, yes, it's time for big guy animations, boys. I made this one for the game starting. I could just imagine it with everything put together in the game. Doom, doom, doom. Here it is in the game. I still have to add the sounds later. I then decided to give the players name tags, which for some reason made the players do this. Which is nice. Now you can see who you have the pleasure of flopping around with. I want the game to be a bit more competitive, since currently most of the players work towards one goal of killing the big dude, so you don't know who the best small guy actually is. I spent some time adding a stat tracker which tells you everyone's damage to death ratio, as well as some information about how the big guy did at the end of the game. Also, I noticed every time the game loads a new level, there's this little freeze. This made me remember that loading screens exist. I made possibly my favorite thing I've ever made in a game for this. The swirly boy. I'm really glad I added these. Now instead of this, which looks tacky AF, the loading screen appears and the swirly boy gracefully stops for a moment, revealing the beautifully loaded level. Now this may seem obvious to you, but this made me realize that when a game is actually loading stuff is when the loading bar stops, not when it's moving. I left this really late because I hate making UI, but I also added a settings menu which has all the basics and even some graphics presets, which is something I'd never made before. This is high graphics, and this is potato mode. I'm not joking, it's actually called potato mode. I'd like to declare I'm the first game with a potato mode. Also, do you like the heads I added to the sliders? They really capture all the emotions the small guys feel when they're transported into a war zone fighting to protect their family back home against the big guy. I did a few things next that you need to have but don't really think about, like finally making the camera stop freaking moving if you have some UI open, picking a new mega player if the current one leaves, and an icon telling you if you have a crap connection, which of course only wants to come up if you have a good connection. I mean seriously, the code says if you have over 400 ping, show the yellow icon. If you have over 800 ping, show the red icon, and if the ping repeatedly doesn't come back, show the disconnect icon. And it still shows up whenever it wants to. I also finally added a sandbox mode where you can switch between both types of player, which not only makes my life 1,000 times easier when testing stuff, but lets you try out new strategies. The game now feels more like, well, a game. The plan is to really polish everything from the gameplay to the maps, so it feels as close to a AAA game as possible in the next update, and then if everything goes to plan, soon after that, release the game. So it's really getting close to the release now. Make sure to wishlist the game on Steam. See you next video.